Welcome to your complete beginner's guide for the DJI Action 5 Pro. In this video, we're gonna go through everything that you need to know about this tiny little camera so you can get up and running fast to make your videos. Now, the way that I'm approaching this is using this as both an action camera and a vlog style camera, because this is a camera that you can put anywhere and be able to get some really interesting footage that's really gonna help you craft your videos and tell your story. So let me give you a quick outline of what you're gonna find in this video. So I'm gonna go through every button on the camera and how everything works, and then we'll dig into all of the different shooting modes and the deeper menus so that you can understand how to use everything in this camera. And then after you have a complete understanding, we're gonna go through how you actually attach audio and use this camera in a variety of ways to be able to get the best footage when you're out filming. So if you're ready, let's get into it. And I want to say a special thanks to DJI for sponsoring this video. All right, so the first thing I want to go over is just everything you're going to find on the camera itself. So you have two screens. You have one on the back, one on the front. The front one is so that you could see yourself when you're vlogging, or if you have the camera positioned in a way where you can't see that back screen, well, the front screen allows you to have a view of what you're seeing. And there's some different ways that you can change this front screen, whether you want to see the full width of what you're capturing, or you just want to see a quick indication, or you could even turn it off. Now on the side, you have your power button and also your quick shot button. So if you press and hold, it's going to turn your camera on, hold it, it's going to turn your camera off. And I'll go into some more features with the quick shots in a little bit. Underneath that, you have a little door. So you can open this up and you'll see that you have a USB-C. So this is how you're going to charge the camera if you just want to charge it with the battery inside. Also, if you want to transfer your footage off of the camera, you can do that using this USB-C. Now on the other side, you have another door. And this door is where your battery compartment is, but it's also where you put a micro SD card if you want to use more data than what's available inside the camera. Now on the bottom, you have your magnetic mount. So you could use this as a magnet, hook it onto anything, if you just want to stick it on there. But also it has two clips and it works with all the different mounts that DJI offers to be able to clip it in, and so this will never fall off. When you're mounting it to something like a bike, a car, a selfie stick, you don't want to just use that magnetic mount. You want to make sure that you have one of these mounts where it clicks in so that it will never fall off. Now also on the front, you'll see where it says Action 5 Pro. There's two microphones right there, and there's also a color temperature sensor, which is super useful, especially if you're someone who's taking this underwater, so you can get better looking footage under the ocean or pool or whatever water that you're in. Now also on the bottom of this camera, you can't see it, but there's a pressure sensor. So this camera can tell how deep you are in the water, or it can also tell you your altitude that you're at. On the top, you'll see these three lines. This is a speaker, so when you're playing back your footage, you can hear it properly. And of course, on the front is your lens, and this is completely removable. So if you want to put other filters on this camera, you just unscrew the clear filter that's on it, and then you can put the other filters on. So if you're someone who's going to be using ND filters, or you want to use something else like a polarizer, well, you can easily screw them on and off. And there's a little rubber ring that comes on and off the outside of this clear filter. All right, so that's everything on the camera itself. Let's talk about some of the accessories that you're probably going to want to use with this camera. So when you're using the Action 5 Pro, the main thing that you're going to be using is this magnetic clip on the bottom of the camera. This allows you to hook to different mounts and be able to put this in interesting places. So one of the main mounts that you're going to use is one of these pronged mounts. It has the two prongs on it, and you can hook this to a bunch of different accessories. It's a good idea to have a few of these mounts handy so that you can have them on some different things and be able to clip this camera in and out. One of the things that I personally do, because I do a lot of overlanding, is that I'll have one of these mounts on my dash of my Jeep, but then I also have one on a suction cup mount. So I can go from my dash and then pop it off by just using the magnetic, use the quick release, pop the camera off, and then I could switch the camera over to one of my other mounts, like on the side of my Jeep to get a side shot, or the front of my Jeep. And then I'll also have an additional mount on a selfie stick so that I can pull this out, get a vlog style shot of myself, or get a shot of me hiking or whatever I'm doing without having to go through and use the prong mount and screw it on and off the different accessories. it's much easier to just have a bunch of these two-prong magnetic mounts and mount them in a bunch of different ways that you're gonna use this camera. So right here I have the camera on a tripod with a selfie stick. And this way, as I'm making this video, I can pop this out, use the camera, pop it back on, and I'm good to keep filming. Now, if you're someone who's going to be mounting this for biking, there's a bunch of mounts that will hook to handlebars. If you're going to be someone who's using this for something, say like motocross, and you want to hook onto your helmet, there's different sticky mounts. There's a lot of different mounts that you can get. And I highly suggest just go through DJI's website and you'll be able to see all the different mounts that they offer. And there's also a ton of third-party mounts that will work with the Action 5 Pro. Now, there's also a plastic case that goes around the camera. And this is useful, especially if you're someone who's going to be shooting vertical content, because your camera easily clicks into this, and now you could set it up in a vertical way using the case. So it has the same magnetic mount that it has on the bottom of the camera on the side of the case. So if you are someone who's doing a lot of vertical content and you're going to be using the camera in this way, the plastic case is an easy addition to be able to always have this accessible to put it in a vertical style. It also adds an additional layer of protection around the camera itself. Now, a couple other things that I personally use. One is the 3 battery charger. This will be able to hold 3 batteries for the Action 5 Pro. And also, you put it in this case, plug in the USB-C, and you can charge all 3 batteries at once. It's just a good accessory to always have so that you have enough batteries for this camera and you can swap them out easy. Also, it keeps them nice and secure in your bag so they're not all over the place. And it's just super easy and small. Now, I use this camera sometimes for vlog style content, just talking to the camera. And there's this additional vlog handle, which gives you a bunch of buttons on the handle, and it also is a battery that will charge the Action 5 Pro. It comes with a USB-C that attaches into the camera, and you could also add additional things like a 3.5mm microphone into the handle, which you could use with the camera. So it's a good little accessory to have if you're someone who is going to be using this camera, putting it on here, and like talking to the camera, being like, hey, what's up? We're here next to this big tree. And one more accessory that you might want with your Action 5 Pro is a set of filters, like I mentioned earlier. This is a set of ND filters. It brings down the exposure so that you could add more motion blur into your footage. Now, not everyone needs ND filters. It's definitely something if you just want to get motion blur, but not everyone needs motion blur. The footage you get out of the camera looks great without putting filters in front of it. And so I'll include a link down below in the description to where you can check out a page that goes through all the accessories that you could get with this camera. And you just need to find the things that will help you mount this camera in the ways that you're planning to use it, because it is super easy to mount with this magnetic quick release. All right, for this next section, let's dig into the camera itself and how you actually use it. And I'm gonna break this up in a few different sections that are more specific, and you could check the timeline down below for the different chapters in this video if you wanna look at something specific. But first, let's just go over what you're gonna find on the screen itself and how you swipe and use the touchscreen. So to turn on the camera, you just press and hold the power button, and you're gonna start seeing an image right away. Now you'll see some info that tells you what's going on with the camera at that time. So in the upper left-hand corner, you're seeing the amount of footage that you have on the storage method that you're using. On the right, you're gonna see your battery life. Now below that, you'll see a 1. This camera does allow you to zoom, so I can click this button here, and I could zoom in up to 2 times. Now underneath that, you'll see some settings that tell you what's going on with the camera, what your settings are. And in the lower left-hand corner, it shows you your mode. So right now it's in photo mode, but you could click this and you could scroll through the different modes that are available in this camera. Above that is the little play icon. You can click this and you can see all of the previous footage that you've already shot. So let me just show you how you could scrub through and see some different shots. Up at the upper left-hand corner, there's the 4 boxes. You click that and you can see as I'm scrolling through, here's all the footage on the camera and it's on the SD card. I could click where it says 85 SD and I can actually switch over to my internal storage and you can see everything that's on the internal storage. So this camera has both internal storage and micro SD card and you can switch between them at any point. And I'll show you where that is in a minute. So you could scroll through and you could click any of the shots and it's just gonna give you a preview and you'll be able to hear the audio. And on the bottom of the screen, you could scroll through the entire shot to see what's going on. Now at any point you could click back and it goes back to the main screen, ready to film. So let's change some settings. Let's get your camera all set up. So if you want to get into, say, video mode, you click the little button in the lower left-hand corner, bring up your settings, and then you could switch over to your video mode. Now, if you want to change your settings for your video mode, you swipe up. So you swipe up, this is gonna have all of your settings to change your camera. So right now, you see I'm in 1080p resolution. I could switch this up to 4K 16:9. I could do 4K 4:3 if I wanted to. I could go all the way up to 120 frames per second, but for right now, I'm just gonna keep it at 30. And then in the upper left-hand corner, you can change the width, so how wide you want the lens to be, or you could change your stabilization. So there's a few different modes you could set up here, and we'll do a quick demonstration in a minute to show you the difference between all of them. But you could set up your rock steady, you could turn it off, you could turn on horizon balancing. Basically everything with stabilization and the width you set up here. Now when you're done setting up your settings, you pull it down, and you could start shooting by clicking the red button on the top of the camera. And then you click the red button again and stop recording. Now, when you start recording, you could swipe down and you could tell the camera how long until you want the screen to go off, but it will continue to record. So I just set mine to never. So now the screen's just always gonna stay on no matter how long I'm recording. Now I could pull this down and I could say 3 seconds. So in 3 seconds, you're gonna see the screen go off, but the camera's gonna be still recording. So it just has this indication on the screen that shows how much time has been recording, but you're not actually seeing what the camera is seeing. And you see it here on the front too. This is good because this helps preserve some battery life, especially if you're not using the screen. At any point you could slide this down and be able to set this differently. And there are some other ways to use this camera when it comes to swiping. Up is all your camera settings, but you could also swipe to the right or left if you want to change the mode that you're in. So you can either push the button in the lower left-hand corner, or you could swipe to select. And then if you want to change any of your exposure settings, over here on the right-hand side, there's these 2 lines with dots. You click this, and it's gonna show you your settings. And this is for exposure, white balance. It's also where you're gonna be able to set log up. And right now I'm in full auto, but I could click Pro in the upper right-hand corner, and it's gonna show you a lot more options. And at any point, you just click on the screen and it's gonna pull that menu away. Now, if you swipe down, this is gonna bring up the deeper menu, which is gonna be how you adjust more settings within the camera itself. And the front screen is also a touch screen, and it has all of the same functionality. So you can swipe down to bring up that deeper menu, swipe right or left to change the different mode that you're in, swipe up to change the settings of that mode. Basically, everything that you get on the back of the screen, you also get on the front of the screen. And the reason for that is you could mount this in different ways where you don't have access to the back of the screen, but you still want full access to the camera. So everything is functional no matter which way the camera is pointed, and you could use either screen. Really cool feature to be able to use this camera in a bunch of different ways. All right, so that's the basic functionality of how the camera works. Now let's dive into some of these deeper menu settings and let's play around with the image a little bit. All right, so let's go over some of the different mode settings that you have available when you're playing around with the camera. So I'm in photo mode right now. If I swipe up, I can turn on and off a countdown. So this allows me to set the camera. It's gonna start a timer before it takes a photo. So if I do 2 seconds, click this button, gives you 2 seconds, and then it takes a photo. If you go over to the right side, there's this wide, you could change the size of the lens. And so in photo, you have 2 options. You have a standard, which is equivalent to like a 14 millimeter, and it's also gonna de-warp the image, so it's not gonna be so bubbly. And then you have your wide setting, which is equivalent to a 10 millimeter, so much wider, but you're gonna have some of that bubble. It's wide, it's gonna see more distortion. Click back at any point. You have your aspect ratio, so you could go from 16:9, 4:3, 16:9 or 4:3, and that's in both medium or large. So medium setting is 8 and 9 megapixels, and the large setting, which is the full use of the sensor, it's 36 and 40 megapixels, whether you're in 16:9 or 4:3. If you're gonna be shooting photos, I always suggest just shooting 4:3 because you're getting more of the sensor. 16:9, you're just cropping in. So you could always go in later and crop in on your photo. You don't need to actually do it in camera, unless you're trying to save space. So I would just shoot large 4:3 unless you need smaller sizes. And then at the bottom, you could do how many images you wanna shoot when the camera actually starts taking photos. So you could do 2 pictures in a second, 3, 6, or 9, or you turn that off. So it'll take a series of photos. So if you're doing something like a jump shot, well, you might wanna take 9 photos so you make sure you get it properly. Now, one other thing that you're gonna wanna set is whether you're shooting JPEG or RAW. So you're gonna click the 2 lines with the dots on the right-hand side, bring up your settings, And then underneath the format, it says JPEG or it says JPEG plus RAW. So if you want the ability to edit the photos with more depth later, you'll want the RAW setting. But if you just want quick photos and you're not gonna do much editing, you could just use the JPEG and save some space. All right, let's go over to video, because the settings are obviously a little bit different. So if you pull up in the upper left-hand corner, you have a few different video modes. So you have video, pre-record, or loop recording. So with pre-record, the camera's always gonna be recording, and when you hit the record button, it's gonna start the recording, but it's also gonna record the amount of footage that you set here before you hit the button. So if I have it set to 30 seconds, when this camera is just on, it's constantly filming. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily recording that footage, but it's gathering it so that when you hit record, it's gonna start recording at that moment plus 30 seconds before that moment. So if you're worried about missing something happening, like some crazy action, set this up so that you make sure that you never miss the shot. Now there's also loop recording, which means it's just gonna continue to record. Even when it's to the end of the card, it's just gonna keep recording over that footage. So it's just constantly recording. Now in the upper right-hand corner, you have your stabilization and also your width. Now when it comes to your stabilization and the width of what you're capturing, it's gonna change based on some of your settings. So when you have it in off, you have no stabilization turned on, you're gonna get more of your sensor. You put on rock steady, it's gonna punch in slightly. You put on rock steady plus, it's gonna punch in even more. And each one of these stabilizations is depending on what you're filming. Now, one of the cool things when you're setting this all up, you could go to a stabilization mode like rock steady and switch the lens, and you'll be able to see what width you're getting, and it shows you the equivalent on the bottom of the screen. So in rock steady, your standard or the dewarped mode is equivalent to a 15 millimeter. Your wide is equivalent to a 12 millimeter, and the ultra wide is equivalent to 11 millimeter. And in video mode, you have access to this ultra wide, not just wide. So if you're doing something where you have a lot of action, maybe it's on a mountain bike or something, you're gonna wanna switch to this ultra wide mode. Whereas if you're vlogging or if you wanna feel more like a traditional camera, switch it over to the standard mode. Now, when we go back a menu, this is where we could set up our resolution and our frame rate. And there's a bunch of different modes here. It all depends on how you're gonna use this footage. Typically, I'm shooting 4K 16:9, 30 frames per second if it's real time, 4K 60 if I might want to slow down the footage, but if I want some super buttery, super slow motion, I'll put it at 120. Now, when we go over to super night mode, this is like a low light setting, and you could use this if it's getting dark out, you're shooting maybe at night in a city and there's some lights. Well, you're not gonna have access to the same modes, but it's similar. So you swipe up, you'll up to 4K 16:9, up to 60 frames per second. And you don't have access to the ultra wide mode. So your settings will be limited somewhat, but you could shoot in lower light situations because of the bigger sensor on this camera. And it optimizes the camera to be able to use it in these settings where they're super low light. Now, there's a few other modes that you have access to. So you have subject tracking, which is gonna keep you centered the entire time. And there's a few different things that you could set up for this. You only have access to 2.7K, you have no 4K in this mode because it is cropping in on your footage to keep you centered the entire time, and you only have access to 60 frames per second. In terms of width, you only have access to the standard mode. All right, so let me show you how this subject tracking works. So I've hit record, and you can see there's a little green box around me, and now the camera's gonna follow me wherever I'm at in the frame. And because I'm shooting in a 9:16 vertical format, you'll see as I move to one side and then the other side, basically it's gonna keep me centered the entire time. And so the subject tracking is a great tool just to make sure no matter where you're at in the frame, you're always centered. Now the next mode you have access to is your slow motion. So when you're shooting in 4K 120 frames per second in the video mode, it's still shot as if you're shooting real-time footage. So it's gonna have audio on it. And when you play it back on your computer, it's gonna be real time like this. It's not gonna be slowed down. When you swap over to the slow motion mode, it's gonna automatically create the slow motion file for you. And so you have access to 1080p up to 4K. 4K and 2.7K is 120 frames per second. 1080p goes up to 240 frames per second. So if you know your clip is gonna only be for slow motion, you could set it here in the slow motion mode and change your settings, and it will automatically slow down the footage for you. The last mode that you have access to is your time-lapse mode. And this is for both doing a time-lapse if the camera's, say, on a tripod, or if you want to do a moving time-lapse, a hyperlapse, you could set that up here. So you could swipe up and you have the two different options, time-lapse or hyperlapse. And it's going to give you some different ways that you could set up your time-lapse. DJI gives you some modes that are already set up for you. So you have crowds, clouds, sunset, or your custom parameters, which allow you to tell the camera how often you want it to take a photo and for how long. So if you don't have a whole lot of experience with time lapses, you could play with the settings that are already in here for you, like sunset or clouds. Start learning what's going to work best for the type of scene that you're filming, and you could do some custom ones as well. And with hyperlapse, it just has a rate that you want the footage to move at. So there's auto, which is the camera's going to create a hyperlapse based out of how long you record the footage for. You could set it 2 times, 5 times, 10 times, 15 times, 30 times. So it just depends on how long you're going to be moving with the camera and how fast you want that clip to be. So a good thing when it comes to time-lapse, hyperlapse, and all the other settings in this camera is go test them. Go take them out, play around with all of these different settings to really get a good feel of how you want to use this camera and which features are going to be the most useful when you're out filming. And just like the other modes, you can go in the upper right-hand corner and change the different widths of how you want the camera to record, whether it's standard, wide, or ultra wide. Now, when it comes to hyperlapse and time-lapse, in the upper left-hand corner, you could set your resolution, 1080p up to 4K, and you could say your frame rate, which is either 25 or 30. And when you have your settings all set up, you'll see it here on the main screen. So I just turned on time-lapse. I'm going to shoot for 60 minutes and it's going to turn into a 20-second clip. And as it's recording, you'll see a countdown, and you'll also see as the 0000 goes up as you get deeper into the time-lapse. And it's the same thing with the hyperlapse. However, you don't see that indication pop up until you hit record. And so you can see now it's recording and it's saying that I've done 10 seconds, 13, 14, 15, and it's made 1 second of footage at the end. So play around with these settings to find what's going to work best for the type of scene that you're filming in. Now we have a very different lighting setup. It's super cloudy, dark. And right now I'm doing my audio with the DJI Mic 2, which is just right here at my chest. It's automatically connected. And also I can record the 32-bit float file as well as the file that's being recorded on the Action 5. So you could have both. But in terms of stabilization, you have a few things that you could do. Right now I'm on just the basic rock steady. And the pole is kind of like bouncing all over the place. Now there's a rock steady plus option, which I just switched to. It's gonna crop in a little bit on the footage. It's gonna be more stable. But with both rock steady and rock steady plus, if you do dips, like you go side to side and the camera's dipping, you're gonna see that horizon dip left and right. So now I've switched over to horizon balancing, and this is going to keep the horizon level even when I'm dipping the camera left and right. So I'm going up this hill, taking a turn. The camera's at an angle, but you're not gonna see that angle. So you can go up to 45 degrees on either direction, and the camera's gonna auto-rotate using the digital image stabilization and always keep it flat. Now, 4K, 30 frames per second, I can only go up to horizon balancing. However, there is an additional mode if you bump it into 2.7K. So now I've switched it over to what's called horizon steady, and this is equivalent to like a 19mm lens. So I can still get this kind of a shot. But here's the cool thing. I'm gonna rotate the camera 360 degrees. The camera's now upside down and back to normal. And when I was rotating, you didn't see any rotation. So you can do a full 360 degree rotation, spinning the camera around, and it's always gonna keep the horizon level. Pretty cool feature, especially if you're in like crazy situation where it's all over the place and you wanna have that steady horizon. Now I've switched back to 4K and I'm in the standard mode, which is equivalent to like a 14mm. Now this also de-warps, so you don't have the bulbing edges and it looks more like a traditional camera. What's pretty cool is you go from standard to wide to ultra wide, and this is equivalent to like a 14, but when you go over to the ultra wide, it's equivalent to a 9mm. Now right now I have the stabilization turned off because the stabilization doesn't work if you want it the widest possible. But if you bump it into rock steady on the ultra wide, you get equivalent to 11mm. So crazy width with this lens. You can go super wide, but you could also zoom in. There is a digital zoom function that you can zoom in 2 times. So just depending on how you want to shoot, you have a range of focal lengths just with the different stabilization and different ways that you're shooting. All right, I feel like we've been going for a while. digging into this camera. There's still a decent amount that we need to go through, but all of my footage that I shoot with my Action 5 Pro and all my other cameras, I color grade using my set of adventure LUTs. And in the next section, I'm going to talk about your camera settings and where you set up log. But how I typically shoot is I'll shoot in a log format, and then I'll use my LUTs that I've created from the different projects I've worked on over the years, and it gives me a quick color grade. So I don't have to go through and manually color grade each clip. And also, I have a standard look that I like to use from video to video across my channel and all the videos that I make, and I've put them into a set of LUTs that you can find down below in the description. All right, let's talk about changing some of your pro settings, because this camera works great in full auto, but there are times where you don't want to just shoot in full auto. You want to take control of your image to be able to get the best look for the scene that you're filming. So I'm going to switch over to video mode, and I'm going to pull up my exposure settings. So I'm going to tap the two lines with the dots on the right-hand side, and this is going to pull up my auto and pro settings. So in auto, you just have a stabilization scenario, and it's either daily or it's sport. Those are the two options that you have access to. Now, daily is for like walking around, not a ton of motion, a little bit of motion, but not like crazy motion. And when you switch it over to sport, this is for if you're high-paced action. It's on a mountain bike. You're running with it. It's on the outside of a car. Put it into sport mode, and it will help the footage look better with the stabilization. Now, also in the auto, you have this image adjustment. So you can click this, hit custom, and you could change the texture and the noise reduction. So the texture is how sharp your footage is. So you could bring this down if you don't want it super sharp, and you can bring your noise reduction down if you don't want to have the camera doing internal noise reduction. This is going to be something that you're going to have to play around with and see what looks best for the types of videos that you make. You can add some more noise reduction up to 1, and you can add some more texture up to 2, or you could go down to a -2. It really is going to depend on what you think looks best. You could just leave it on default if it's not something you even want to play around with and you think the footage looks great out of camera. All the B-roll footage that I've showed you from this camera, it's just on the default. I haven't gone through and brought down the texture or the noise reduction for any of this footage. Now, when you're ready to take control of your footage, you hit the Pro setting in the upper right-hand corner. It's going to bring up your Pro settings, and you could change things like your exposure, white balance, color, your stabilization scenario, and your image adjustment. So let's talk about your exposure. So when you click your exposure, there's either some auto settings that you can tweak, or you could go full manual. So with the auto setting, you could change the range that your ISO is operating in. So you could go from 100 to 800, or you could go all the way up to 100 and 25,600. And so as you go higher in your ISO, your footage is gonna get a little bit more noisy. And if you're someone who wants less noise, well, you could change this range for the audio to only go so high. And then on the left-hand side, you have your EV, which is your exposure value. And you could expose brighter than what the camera thinks is auto, or you could expose darker. So for this scene here, I'm gonna expose 3 stops under what the camera thinks is auto. And you could see here, the image is super dark. Now, if I go the other direction, I could expose 3 stops over what the camera thinks is proper exposure, and it's all completely overexposed. So you use this with your auto settings. If you are getting footage that's a little bit too bright or a little bit too dark, you could go in here and just adjust your EV to change what the camera thinks looks best. Make it a little brighter, make it a little darker. Now, you could take full manual control by clicking the M, lower left-hand corner, and now you have control of your shutter speed on the left, make it darker or brighter, and you have your ISO on the right. And you could change specific ISOs, or you could also do the range 100 to 1600, 100 to 3200. You could play around with this any way that you need to be able to adjust your exposure. So the other thing you have access to in your Pro mode is white balance. So right now it's set to auto. I could go to manual set this to 5600 because I'm out here in the sun. And then when I'm moving around whatever scene that I'm in, you won't see the colors fluctuate. So if I was going behind this tree and then back out, then back in, well, you might see a small shift in your color. This way, you don't see that shift when you're recording. And if you don't care about that and you just always want the camera to decide what the white balance is, just leave it on auto white balance. Now, the next option you have access to is your color mode. So you have 8-bit or 10-bit color in this camera, and 10-bit allows you to do some more color grading. So if you want to do some color grading in your editing software, you always want to be shooting in 10-bit. It's going to be more data, but you're going to have more flexibility to color grade later on. Now you have access to normal 10-bit, or you have HLG 10-bit, or you have D-Log 10-bit. And for me, I'm usually shooting in either D-Log or the normal profile when I'm out filming. So D-Log is gonna make your image super flat. It's gonna be a completely washed out looking image, but it allows you to do more color grading. So if you are gonna apply a LUT, or you wanna go through and color grade each shot independently, you would wanna put it in the D-Log setting so you can get the most out of your footage. And it's gonna do things like preserve your highlights, preserve your shadows, so that when you go into your color grade, you're gonna be able to actually color grade the footage, and you're not gonna lose things like your sky. It's gonna bring down your dynamic range so the image is flat, but that allows you to do the color grading to make the sky look how bright you want the sky and how you want the shadows to look. And so I'm gonna bring back up my exposure, and I have it on 10-bit D-Log M, and you can see there's this color recovery on the other side. When I click this on, you're gonna see an image that has contrast and saturation. However, it's still recording the log, the flat image. So if you wanna see the log flat image, turn this off, and you'll see what the camera's actually recording. Now in the normal setting, the stabilization scenario is available, sport or daily, but when you switch over to log, that option's not available. So it's only something that's available in that normal setting. And so shoot log if you wanna color grade your footage, shoot normal if you wanna be able to edit it without doing color grading, or you're just like posting on social media or something like that. 8-bit, if you're not gonna touch the footage whatsoever, but if you are gonna play around with this footage, always shoot in that 10-bit. All right, so let's dig into some of the deeper menu settings that's gonna help you shoot with this camera. So at any point you could swipe down on the screen and it's gonna pull up this deeper menu, the more advanced settings. The first one is your custom profiles. If you shoot in the same way over and over, you could set up a specific style here. So let's go back to the main screen and let's set up a style. So I shoot in 4K 16:9. Let's say I'm shooting in 30, standard, rocksteady, plus for shooting some vlog style content. Now what I would do is I'd swipe down, hit the little button in the upper left-hand corner, hit that plus icon, and it's gonna show me all those settings, and I could hit confirm. Now at any point, if I wanna switch to that setting, I just swipe on the screen, and I could go to video 1, which is what I have set up with those settings. Now also, if you wanna switch modes and you don't wanna use the touchscreen, that's what the quick shot button is on the left-hand side of this camera. So you just click this.
Vlog, video, photo.
And you could switch through the different modes that you have set up. And you could hear that it's actually talking to me. So if I'm not looking at the screen, I could just click this.
Vlog, video 1.
Video 1 is the one that we just set up. Now I know I'm in the right settings to start recording. Now, if you don't want the camera to talk to you, you swipe down and there's the button that says QS. You click this and you turn off the voice prompt. The voice prompt is what's telling you video 1, photo, vlog, whatever. And also in this quick shot menu, you could set up which modes are set up on this quick shot button on the side. So there's gonna be modes when you swipe across that you'll have, but you don't always have to have those all in the quick shot. So let's say if I just want that video 1 and I wanna take off photo, I wanna put on hyperlapse and take off video. Now, press the quick shot, there's only 2 modes, video 1 and hyperlapse.
Video 1, hyperlapse.
So only put the modes that you actually are gonna use on this quick shot menu. Now at any point you could go back and you could trash this style if you don't like it. So I go over to video 1, hit the trash icon in the upper right hand corner, and I can delete it. So you could set up different modes depending on the way that you're shooting. Now, there's also some modes already set up for you. So if you're in this menu, you can click this plus icon, and you could scroll through all the different modes that DJI has already set up for you. There's vlog, there's fishing, there's hiking, there's skiing, diving, surfing, a bunch of different modes that have some different characteristics to each one depending on the activity. So again, it really comes down to doing the customization to get the most out of this camera. Now back to this advanced menu screen, if you press the little sun, it shows the brightness of the screen. So you can turn this up or down. The little gear icon is gonna go into another settings menu, an even deeper menu. The little square with the 2 arrows is your orientation lock. So this camera when you're using it, you can rotate it and the menus will automatically switch. So you can see when I rotate this, all the menus will switch and I can swipe up and the camera is now positioned for this vertical orientation. Switch back to horizontal, everything is oriented back to horizontal setting. And also when you rotate it, it's automatically gonna adjust the orientation of the footage. So if I rotate it, hit record, it's now gonna be shooting vertical content, switch back to horizontal with the camera not recording, click record again, it's gonna shoot horizontal. Now, if you don't want it to do that and you just always wanna shoot horizontal or you always wanna shoot vertical, you use this button to use your orientation lock. And so set the camera how you want it to be, click this button and it's gonna lock that orientation. Now, next to that is a screen lock. You can click this at any time, it's gonna lock your screen. So no matter what you do and you touch the screen, not gonna change any settings. And then you swipe up to get out of that screen lock. Now, the next option is for voice commands. So you can turn this on and you can actually talk to the camera and it will start recording. So I could say, start recording. And the camera's gonna start recording. And I could say, stop recording. And the camera's gonna stop recording. So this is a useful feature if you need to be able to talk to the camera and you don't wanna physically touch it. So say I had it in my Jeep, like in the passenger side facing me, a little bit wider shot, I could say, start recording. It's gonna start recording, I'll hear that ding, and I'll know that it's recording. And the last button in this menu, displaying the full front screen either on or off. So when it's on, basically it's gonna fill this front screen. So it's actually gonna be cropped in, but you're recording more than what you're seeing. And when it's off, you'll see that there's black bars on top and bottom if you're shooting 16:9, because it wants to show you the full width of what you're actually capturing. So if you just wanna use this as a quick reference, say you're vlogging and you just wanna make sure that you're centered, you could leave this to on, and then you always have that full square filled with what's going on versus having it off and you're gonna have black bars on there, so it's gonna be even smaller of a screen. All right, so let's dig into the deeper menu, the gear icon in the upper right. So now you have some different options here that you don't really need to dig in that often, but there might be some stuff you wanna turn on before you actually go out and start recording. So the first option you have is for snapshot. So at any point you can press and hold the record button when the camera's off. It's gonna turn on start recording in a setting that you have set up. And then when you click the record button again, it's gonna stop recording and turn off the camera. This is called a snapshot. It's a quick way to get up and running fast with this camera without having to turn it on and then press record. So you can have this set up to a specific mode, or you could just have it set up to the last settings that you use. So when you turn the camera off, press and hold the record button, the snapshot will use those previous settings. And here's where you could switch what settings you want to have happen when you click your snapshot. Now also in this menu, you have a single screen preview, so only one of the screens is going to show you what's going on. You have wireless mic. You have a boost lens, so if you have an additional lens that you can add on front of this camera, you have to use this setting to turn that on. It's called the FOV boost lens. You have your voice controls, and you could go in here to change your language, but also this is where your voice commands are. So start recording, stop recording, take a photo, and shut down. You have an option for depth and altitude. So when you're using this, you could say, oh, I'm hiking and parachuting, and I'm gonna display my altitude, and you could do relative or absolute. And so when we're recording, you'll see that there's a little indication here on the side that shows you at what altitude you're recording at. Right now it says I'm at 0 feet, which is pretty close. Ocean's right over there. So I'm a little bit more than 0 to 1 foot. But when you start actually going up into like the mountains, up in the sky, you'll see this change depending on how high you're going. And it's the same thing when you're diving down into, say, the ocean. Now you could set up your display to always be on, or you could turn that off and you could show the style when it's off. So you could just have a little indicator, or you could have timer show how much time is recording. Just depends on what you want. You could have your screen record when you turn off. It's that same thing when you swipe down. You could tell how long until your screen turns off. You have a built-in mic as an audio backup. So you could always have your audio recording as a backup on the camera. There's an option for a timer shooting, so you can have this camera turn on at a certain time and start recording in a mode that you have set up. There is a USB mode, so you could attach this to your computer using USB-C and use this camera through that USB-C. There is a wireless connection, so you could hook wirelessly to your phone and be able to use the DJI Mimo app to control it. And I'll show you the DJI Mimo app in a little bit, so we could go through that as a secondary way to operate this camera. You have your bitrate. So if you want to do a higher bitrate, you could do that here. And this is for video, so you could shoot in a higher bitrate, more data, more ability to control your footage. You could turn your sounds on or off. So as I've been making this video, you've been hearing the camera beep and do different things. You could turn that off if you don't want any beeps, but I like to hear it unless I'm in a setting where I don't want to hear it. There's a grid, so you could have a grid on the frame to help you with composition. So you could do rule of thirds, which is pretty standard. You could do diagonal, or you could do diagonal and rule of thirds. It's kind of the same as DJI's drones. Now, there is an option in this camera to do timecode, and you could display this timecode on the camera when you're recording. So you could turn this on and you could sync to your phone. It will display your timecode in the frame. Now, not everyone really needs that, but if you're using multiple cameras, it's good to sync via timecode. Now, you can't jam sync this camera like you can other cameras. However, if you get it close, then you could use that timecode to help you with your editing. So for me, I often have multiple cameras running, especially if I'm shooting like documentary style content or I'm out doing an adventure. It's good to be able to use timecode to know when in the day something was shot, so that if something happened in the morning, I can know, oh, I shot some footage from the morning with the Action 5 Pro, but I also use this camera, and I'll be able to sync them up and use them together. So it's a good idea just to always have all of your cameras just synced as close as possible to time of day timecode. Options to do some naming management. You could do an auto power off, so how long till the camera turns off with nothing happening on it. You could do some calibration in here. You could also go in here and adjust your storage if you need to format your cards. And you could also attach your Bluetooth remote controller. There's some time and date settings, factory reset, device info, all of that. Now you could record both with your micro SD card or the internal storage. Now, if you ever need to adjust your storage, you click the storage button in this deeper menu. You could set where you want to record the footage. So right now mine's set to internal. I can quick set it to SD card. And then if you click the storage button, this is where you actually can format. Now, I appreciate that DJI has put this so deep in the menu, because you never want to accidentally click on this menu and then format your card with a bunch of footage in it. So this is buried deep for a reason. And you'll go through and you can format your internal storage, or you can format your SD card. But make sure you take everything off of it before you actually format it. So that's everything in the deeper menu. Now let's dig into how you actually use a wireless microphone with the Action 5 Pro. So if you are going to be recording audio with the Action 5 Pro, you're going to be doing something like this. The easiest way is going to be to use a DJI Mic 2, because this is not only a transmitter that can sync with your Action 5 Pro, but it's also a wireless recorder as well. So to set this up, you'll just want to make sure to turn on your DJI Mic 2, go into your deeper menu, and you're going to want to scroll down to wireless mic. So you'll tap on this, and then what you want to do is on the DJI Mic 2 is press and hold the record button until you see the green light on the side of the DJI Mic 2 turn blue. Now what you'll want to do on the side of the DJI Mic 2 is there's a little chain icon, little link. So you'll press and hold that. It's going to put it in pairing mode, and then you're going to tap TX1 or TX2. It's going to pull up this screen, and it's going to automatically connect. And now you could use your DJI Mic 2 for your audio. And you can see here's some settings. So it shows you how much battery life's left, how much data you have left on the microphone as a wireless recorder. You could set your monitor volume. So if you had headphones plugged in, you could what you're getting out of this microphone, and you could turn that up or down. You could turn on your LED lights. You could turn on your vibration on the Mic 2. You could turn on dual audio recording, so that it's going to record in the camera, but also on the backup as well. So you have both. You could add a low cut filter, which I'm going to turn that off. You could add your 32-bit float recording. You could do an auto power off, and you could also format the transmitter in here. So you have full control over this transmitter in the Action 5 Pro, and you can hook up to 2 of these transmitters, so you can have 2 people talking and get wireless audio. You could hook it to your shirt. You could hook it to your hat, and now you just have audio, and you could walk away from camera. I often like to use one of these wireless microphones so that I can get wider shots and not always have to be so close to the camera. And when you're using the DJI Mic 2, when you're back on the main screen, you'll see that your audio levels are at the top of the screen, the green line that pops up. So you can always see if your audio is too loud or too quiet, it's all right here on the screen. Now let's dig into how you use this camera with your phone. So you can control the Action 5 Pro, and this is also going to be where you update the camera. So I highly suggest when you first start using your Action 5 Pro, hook it to the Mimo app so that you have the most current firmware. So I'm going to pull up the Mimo app and I'm going to connect the camera. So I'm going to click the camera icon. It's going to search for the camera and you'll see that the camera pops up. I hit connect. It's going to go through and connect. It's going to want me to join the Wi-Fi network that the Action 5 Pro has set up. It's going to connect to that Wi-Fi and then it's going to pull up my camera view. So you can see right here, I'm seeing what the camera is seeing. So I could control this camera completely wirelessly. And on the side here is all your different modes. So you have hyperlapse, time-lapse, slow motion, video, photo, everything. In the upper left-hand corner, you have your home button. Click the camera to go back to this menu. You have your settings, so you could do all of the same camera settings, manual or auto. You could set up your resolution and your frame rate. You could zoom in here. And you could click the 3 dots in the lower left-hand corner to adjust all your pro settings. And there's some extra things in here that you don't have on the camera itself. So there's an overexposure alert and there's a histogram. So this is going to help you if you have footage that's very overexposed. So let's put it back to a normal. Let's go to 400 ISO, 800 shutter, and you can see that the sky and all of this is overexposing. You get these zebras that show you where your overexposure is. And so let's bring this back to auto. And then also you have your histogram. This shows you all your exposure values from the darkest to the brightest. And you can see where the exposure is. So if it's too far to the right, it's showing you things are overexposed. If it's too far to the left, it's showing you that things are underexposed. Now in the upper right-hand corner, you could set up your custom modes. Lower left-hand corner, you could see all your previously recorded footage. It brings up your whole library. And you could pull up your footage. You could go in here, you could do your log recovery, which is just going to bring up a standard look. Or you could go in and adjust manually all your settings. Now, if you've edited your footage, you made it look how you want it to, you can hit export. You could change your resolution. You could export your video, and it's going to go to your phone. This is one way that you could take the footage off your camera and just bring it directly into your phone and start using it in different ways in your social media, or if you're editing using your phone. If you're using this on your computer, well, what you're going to want to do is just plug in the USB-C and then it'll load up like any other camera and you pull your footage off that way. The Mimo app does give you some flexibility to do color grading and things like that in the app itself. Go back to my photos. And now this is on my phone and I could share it. And you can see there's a little watermark in the lower left-hand corner. You could take that on or off when you export your footage. Now, if you do want to edit your videos in the Mimo app, there is this editor button back on the home screen, and you could go through and actually use DJI's editor to create little videos. But you do have this option if it's something that you want to do on the DJI app. Now, I've switched over to the DJI Action 5 Pro. Normal color. I'm not going to do any editing to this. I put the wireless mic so I could have a conversation with you. And so that is basically everything that you need to know to get up and running fast with this camera. Like I said earlier, go through, find the settings that make the most sense for the types of things that you're filming. You could use this camera in so many different ways. You could use it like this in a vlog way. You could mount it to different things and get some really cool footage, action style footage. This camera has a lot of features packed into it that's gonna be able to help you get the footage that you need for the videos that you're creating. So if you have any questions, or if you want me to dig into any topics deeper with the Action 5 Pro, let me know down below in the comments. And if you're someone who wants to make outdoor adventure style videos, well then you should check out this playlist right here, which is gonna go through a ton of different tutorials on how to make outdoor adventure style videos with your Action 5 Pro. I'll see you over there.